Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the podcast. It has been a bit. It has been a little over a month since I've been on here to put something out. It's been quiet, quiet for sure. Maybe quieter than I even anticipated. Uh, but cottage season is over. I had my last cottage trip last week in Tennessee, but I'm back now, refreshed and ready to get into it. There's really not a lot to talk about still, but we'll go through some things. It's some prospect stuff. We'll talk about Olen Zellweger. I finally did the article on him. Get into a couple guys that are still out in the market, preseason, expected scouting. We'll get into that a little bit. Uh, all of those things on docket for today. How long this goes, I don't know. We'll see. Uh, but this is more just kind of getting back in the flow, getting back in that groove, getting a podcast out there again, getting in that weekly flow that we're used to, especially this year when we're going to start doing the post game shows full season instead of picking it up in the middle of the season like last year. We'll do it the full year this year. That seemed to have a lot of positive feedback, so we will continue that going into next season. But yeah, like I said, it's I hope everybody has and is still having still a few more weeks left in summer before we get to Labor Day, and you could say maybe that's the end of summer, but still a few weeks here. I hope everybody had a great summer, relaxing, enjoyed some weather. I got to travel a little bit of beach, a little bit of Tennessee mountains. That was really nice. I really enjoyed that experience. Um, we launched a new website, expanded Expected Buffalo brand with Expected Scouting with Austin. So, like I said, we'll get into that at the end here. But yeah, it was good. It was some time away. It was a longer season than I'm used to. This is the first year that we had playoffs, and going through the grind of an 82 game season and then 2 rounds of the playoffs. Covering a winning team for the first time, it took a lot out of you. While fun, it took a lot out of me, and it was good to step away for a little bit, refresh, plan some things for this year we're going to do different to make everything, better. And then, of course, just, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? Just let it go. So that's some things we'll do with some of the coverage as well. But yeah, for the team, the league itself, it was super quiet. I mean, per usual, but usually maybe you even have like 1 or 2 things happen, and just really was nothing after like the 4th of July. Everybody went to their cottages and stayed there. Now, teams starting to get back into it. We're seeing some little minor things, some minor prospect trades. The Sabres themselves were even involved in one with the Stiven Sardarian trade to the Carolina Hurricanes. He was a 3rd-round pick in 2021. Put up a few good seasons at Michigan Tech. He had 12 goals and 44 points in 37 games last year. The year before that, he had 11 goals and 35 points in 35 games for Michigan Tech. 4 years in college. From what I understand, it seems like, maybe the preference on both sides, or either way, not a desire to get a contract signed there. They move him to the Hurricanes. He signs a deal with the Chicago Wolves. And, that's another prospect, and really another Russian prospect that is out the door from that class in the early 2020s when they leaned into Russians, and it just seemingly didn't work in their favor. But yeah, off of that, it was interesting to kind of dive into the prospect part a little bit here. Some conversations I think that sparked that I had from that, kind of just getting back in the flow and seeing where things were and all of that good stuff. It was interesting to me that I was told that there's a couple guys in their system that they have some concerns over, potentially signing, and maybe that could be something we see not now, but as we move forward in other trades, we can start to see some of those guys moved, or maybe they do sign, things change. But from what I was told, there's maybe 2 to 3 guys they have concerns with, and I don't know exact names. I mean, if you can kind of just look at it like, Poltapov, for example, is probably one of them. He's one of those Russians. this is the final year of his contract in Russia. Um, seemingly, of course, I understand there's concerns about him actually coming to the U.S. Um, we'll see how that plays out. He's really the only Russian left. Sardarian's gone. Neuchev's gone. Novikov is gone. Komarov is still in the AHL, but there's not really a clear path or really an NHL player there. So Poltapov may be their last hopes in terms of those early, like I said, early 2020s Russian players they drafted, of being somewhat of an NHL player. At least if he does come over at 23 years old, 24 at the time, if he comes over, he'll be a fully cooked player. So that'll be good if they can get that done. And then again, just pure dot connecting on my part. If you want another player, maybe to keep an eye on, I think is Adam Kleber. He's a guy that I heard about around the deadline, that they were putting in some trade conversations. And I think even this offseason, if there was a potential that he could have been in some things if they would have got stuff done. But we'll see. Again, there's time here. Things can change. So I wouldn't by any means get held up on it. This isn't really an abnormal thing. If you look at this roster as a defenseman like Kleber, you could see, the logjam you have in front of you. Daxton Rudolph was just drafted. Merca is still here. There's a pretty locked in top four. You can understand that from his perspective. Same thing, with Poltapov or Sardarian. You look at this forward roster. I mean, they're pretty stacked at forward. They're graduating Oslin. They're graduating Helenius. They're graduating, already graduated, but he's back. Yuri Kulik. So, again, Benson signed. Doan signed. Still a few more years left on Tage's contract. Jack Quinn, if he stays, is another guy. So you can see the log jam at forward, and you can understand some of these prospects don't see their path and may want an opportunity to go elsewhere. But like I said, I don't think there's anything we need to crazy worried about now. I just found it interesting. And I thought about those couple guys that I mentioned could be some of those guys. But again, to be clear, I don't know the exact name. These are more those two, and Kleber and Poltapov are more just kind of dot connecting on the circumstances. But prospects, man. Prospects have been a thing in hockey conversations the last 24 to 48 hours. The Athletic with Corey Pronman's, can't even say his name right, Corey's under 23 rankings. Zach Benson at 124 raised some eyebrows. But it wasn't even that. It was just, I think, full credit to him. I think he managed to piss off a fan of every single team. So, I guess full credit on pulling that bit off, right? But it's definitely been a thing the last 48 hours with Benson. I don't find a need to really get too into it there. I mean, it's silly. And like for me, the guy I understand, ranking prospects, everybody has different opinions. It's not easy. It's you put yourself out there to take beatings, to get yelled at, to get called names because people don't agree with you. So it takes a lot to put yourself out there. Now, I think some of this is a little outlandish and maybe sticking to pre-draft notions or beliefs you had in players and not adjusting off of that. So be it. That's how you want to do it. But definitely working with Austin and getting that side expected scouting going and having some conversations on what he wanted to do and how he wanted that site to be set up. I have a soft spot for somebody willing to put out their rankings for prospects because it's never usually one that you just have everybody go, oh, this is a good ranking, and I agree with everything you have here. There are often disputes because we love to fight about 17 and 18-year-old players, and most of us have no idea what exactly they're going to be in the NHL. But it's part of the gig, right? That's the fun that we have. So Benson definitely in the prospect world has been a thing, even though he's not really a prospect anymore, but whatever. We put up our under 24 top 25 rankings for this year. We had our consensus rankings from myself, Eddie, and Austin that we put together, and then we compared that up against what the fan vote was. Top five was pretty close. Hellenius was number one. Rudolph was number two. And then there was a mixture of Mirka, Morozov, and Kleber, or whoever in that top five. Kleber, I think we had it in ours, but he wasn't in the fan one. Maybe have it backwards. But yeah, that was fun. That's always fun to go through that, to really, dive into those players again, refresh yourself on those players. Especially this year, going through that, it was interesting to note as I was putting it together. I was like, wow, a lot of these players improved from where they were last year. And then I went and sat and thought about it. And well, if you think about it, the way we do it, so we do players under 24 that have played less than 41 NHL games. That's what we consider a prospect and how we do it. We taking that, two players graduated out of the prospect pool in Oslin and Kozak. And then there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players that were in the rankings last year that are no longer in the organization. Devin Levi traded, Isak Rosén traded, Anton Wahlberg traded, Novikov no longer in the organization, Neuchev traded, no longer in the organization, Ryerson Leanders opted not to sign him, and Olivier Nadeau also no longer in the organization. So, like I said, the fan vote was Hellenius, Rudolph, Mirka, Morozov, Kleber in your top five. Our consensus was actually the same: Hellenius, Rudolph, Mirka, Morozov, and Kleber. We had, as a staff, Osborne at 6, Zemer at 7. The fans had Zemer and Serbak as your 6, 7, respectively. So, varying degrees on players. Even if you go through, what I put out from how I had him ranked, how Austin had him ranked, how Eddie had him ranked. As you get out of that top five, you start to see us even have differences in how we rank players. Like the 11th overall player, for example, Gavin McCarthy. I had him ranked 18th. Austin had him 10. Eddie had him 15th. So, some real differences there as you start to get into the nuances and deeper in that prospect pool. But makes for fun conversation. And everybody has a guy they want to follow. It makes it fun to follow the AHL, to check in on NCAA college hockey, to see how your guys are doing. That's all the fun part of following those prospects through. Let's jump to the Zellweger article I finally was able to put together. Watched the tape about a month ago. Had to refresh myself with some of the notes that I took. It's been a little bit. Had to rewatch some of the clips that I had and the reasons I pulled those. But, you can check out the article on the site, expectedbuffalo.com. It's free. It's open for everybody to read. So same thing with Crevier. If you missed that, I did that back in July. Very similar process that I went through. Again, that one is also free. So, check those two up for going to the season if you haven't yet. For Crevier and Zellweger, those are the two big additions this offseason for the Sabres. But on Zellweger, he's an interesting player for me. I really like the fit from a system perspective with his skating, his offensive upside, his transition ability, the way he can move and read the play in the offensive zone. If you think of as a Byram placement with that high cycle that they did, they really got the defenseman involved. Zellweger can do all of those things. Some of the numbers from an underlying perspective, from his on-ice expected goals for, so his shot quality, his on-ice goals or his goal differential, even those are all solid numbers when you look at with the Ducks over the last 2 years from an offensive standpoint. And you notice I keep going to offensive standpoint because while I feel that this could work, while I'm excited about the addition, while I see the system fit, while I see what they're going for, it's not, everything's not clean here. There are certainly concerns with the defensive side. He's a player that when you watch, I think makes some poor decisions in the defensive zone. I think there's times when he just throws the puck away. I mean, he doesn't need to. I think there's time that he makes bad reads in other areas of the ice that put him in a bad position or cause him to give up scoring opportunities. There's a reason that he fell out of favor with Joel Quenneville and Anaheim at times. And Lindy in Buffalo wants his defensemen to be involved offensively. He wants them to get into the play. He wants them to take risks, right? So I think that's good for Zellweger, but and with these NHL coaches, there's only so much you can really deal with from a defensive perspective. You can do A, B, and C offensively, and that's great, grand, wonderful. But if you're costing your team at the other end of the ice, the leash gets short. And I think that's something that we're going to have to watch is, we don't need him to be some great, excellent defensive defenseman. I think if he's an average player in his own zone, that's great. If you look at it from a pure Byram replacement, Byram was not the greatest or an excellent defensive player by any means. I think this season you would probably say he was average, maybe slightly above average to give him credit for this year. And I think if you can get average play out of Zellweger in your own end, admitting and understanding you're going to have some pains there, you're going to have some mistakes, and you're just going to have to kind of grit your teeth and deal with those, because I think the rest of his game is going to play in pretty well with what you want your team to do, and it's going to result in scoring opportunities, going to result in goals, and to kind of keep what is the strong point of your team going in the right direction. So it's difficult, and the difference when you look at Crevier and Zellweger is they both average under 15 minutes at 5-on-5, but the key difference that I talk about in the article, Crevier had a much more difficult deployment. He faced a higher quality of opponent, or quality of competition is what we call it. He was put in high leverage situations to protect leads. All of those things, like with the Blackhawks, he got familiar with that. And, some of his numbers, from a team perspective, are not the best, the greatest. The Blackhawks, none of those players really were. Now, all things considered, on that team, he had some pretty good numbers, but on the overall picture, when you look at it, they're ugly. But again, that's the entire Blackhawks roster. But for me, like, when I'm looking at it now and saying, okay, who's going to be my number 4 defenseman right now? Honestly, and I put it in the article, I would probably give the favor to Crevier right now. And the reason is I think I can trust him out of the gate in those more difficult deployments, protecting a lead, defensive zone starts, that kind of usage, than I think I can Zellweger. Now, the nice thing I think the Sabres set them up for is, depending on your game state or the current situation of a game, if you're leading or if you're trailing, you can rotate those 2 players. If you're behind, you can give Zellweger more minutes. If you need to protect the lead, then maybe you give Crevier more minutes. But I think if you're looking for a guy who's going to step in and replace the 17, nearly 18 minutes of 5-on-5 hockey and lean that heavily into a top 4 defense, I think you're going to be able to this year. I think you're going to need to rely on all 3 of your pairs. Now, it's not to say that Crevier or Zellweger couldn't step up and grow into that, and you can then lean on your top 4 again. But, sitting here right now, from what they've seen, Zellweger's only 22 years old. Crevier, I think, is 25, but Zellweger's still young at 22. I can't really make an argument that either one of those guys are prepared to step into a 17-minute-a-night role in the top 4. I think there will have to be a rotation. I think that there will have to be some, I don't want to say sheltering, because really when you're using your top 4 defensemen, you don't want to shelter them. But yeah, I mean, I guess the rotation would be the best way to put it. And it's only rotation your top 4. I think it's a rotation of using all 3 of your pairs. You're going to have to hope Timmins can play well. You're going to have to hope that Metza can play well again, or whatever mix you want to have there. That's one of the reasons, for me, that I was so adamant in June and early July of adding another depth defenseman here, something better than Timmins. Now I know they got Zellweger and they got Crevier, but those are maybe your combo replacement of Byram, 2-for-1. But I think they still could have used another defenseman to replace Timmins. Lindy Ruff likes Timmins. He kills penalties, so I get that he's back on this roster, and it is what it is. Maybe you get a more consistent performance, I'll say. I don't want to say better. I think he was okay last season at times. But maybe if I can get more consistent performance out of Timmins, that'll be good, and that'll help the team. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's a fun player. I think he'll be exciting to watch. I think he'll make some good plays. I think there'll be some frustrating plays in there that'll definitely spark some debates on how impactful he is overall, offense versus defense. But it'll be a fun player nonetheless. Entertaining, entertainment hockey, right? That's kind of what we all hope for, including wins at the end of the day. All right, so let's look around the league here where we're at. We're about a month out. The Sabres themselves are a month from the preseason starting on September 21st. Dylan Larkin and Connor Hellebuyck both remain on their respective teams. Two guys that seemed very likely to be dealt. Two guys that there's not a lot of chatter around right now. I mean, the Red Wings don't even have a general manager, for goodness sake. So I guess we're going to wait to see how that plays out. Hellebuyck was connected to the Sabres, but he still remains. As I said a month ago, and I still believe now, I think it's likely that he starts in Winnipeg, and then we'll see as the season moves along where that goes for him. But it's interesting. It's interesting that both guys, sitting here right now, it seems will probably start the season with their teams when that seemed very unlikely 2 months ago. So that's kind of the way that it plays out sometimes. But yeah, there's really not a lot in the free agent pool left out there. I mean, I don't think Tarasenko has a contract, and I don't think, who am I thinking of? Patrick Laine, so I'm thinking of. He doesn't have a contract yet, although he might be a PTO guy. Tarasenko might be a PTO guy too. But yeah, so I think we can pretty comfortably say this is likely your roster that is sitting here right now. And I guess that's a conversation that over the next couple of weeks we can get deeper into. But I feel like sitting here in the end of August that it was worth mentioning those guys are still there, and it's different situations and scenarios. I think one is just they don't have a general manager, and he only has a 3-team list he'll go to, or 4-team list he'll go to. The other guy, you have a stubborn general manager who, maybe at one point had something in place, but then he didn't, but then he did, but then he didn't. And, here we are still waiting for that to play out. So we'll see. You never know. Maybe something happens late. I mean, we had an Erik Karlsson trade a couple years ago. Maybe more than a couple years ago. Can't even remember at this point. Drop in late. So maybe we could see a similar thing happen here, but I wouldn't hold my breath there. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's really much at this point to touch on until we're a little bit closer. Expected scouting, definitely check that out. New site under the Expected Buffalo brand. We launched that in the beginning of August. Austin is doing that, has a lot of content he's put together. So definitely check that out. It is going to be completely free for the rest of this month. So get in there. Understand what he's doing, covering a lot of players, a lot of prospect content. Hlinka, early 2027 guys. It's a different type of hockey content, right? I get it. It might not interest everybody, but if you want to expand your knowledge, if you want to understand some of these players that are going to be coming into the NHL, and then throughout the season, he'll do some check-in on Sabres prospects too, right? There's a lot of guys playing collegiate hockey this year. So we'll do some check-ins on that and to see how other players are going throughout the seasons as those start to get underway, even as early as next month. So expected scouting, check it out. Austin's putting his heart and soul into that, so definitely support him. Support the brand, if you will, as we continue to grow. This is kind of a stepping stone for step one to see how this growth goes. And then if this is successful, we have plans for 2, 3, and 4 behind it. So any support you can give is greatly appreciated there. I think that's it. For you soccer folks out there, European football, if you will, Premier League, Tottenham Hotspur, got my hat on today. Gets underway on Saturday, so pretty excited for that. My Spurs decided they were going to spend a lot of money this summer, so that's always fun. We'll see if that works out. At least they hopefully won't be in relegation contention this year, at the very least. One would hope, of course. But yeah, it's fun. After how fun the World Cup was, I'm excited to get soccer going again here. Not just the Premier League, but all over the world. Serie A, La Liga, all those fun ones, Bundesliga. All those fun leagues in Europe that some of us enjoy to watch gets going. So that'll be good fun here to kill some time before we get to training camp in the middle of September. Okay, well, that's it. Almost 30 minutes, not bad today. Kind of getting into some things, getting back on the horse, if you will. So thanks for listening. These will be more routine. I'll try for weekly. There's got to be some content to talk about, but I'll do my best to put some topics together as we lead into, like I said, the training camp in a couple weeks. So hope everybody had a good summer. Time to get back into hockey. I know football is going and baseball and all that, but come on, hockey. We're close to hockey season. So thanks for listening, and we will talk again soon. See ya.